I should be talking today about the power of improvisation. I've been thinking a lot about that and the magic of improvisation. And I promise that if I ever do another TED Talk, I will talk about that. But as you know, I'm going to talk about the power of dialogue. And for that reason, I'm not using slides today. What I want you to do is to try to listen to me for a while and to see whether I can take you to a different place. You may be thinking why I want to talk about the power of dialogue. Well, I'm going to tell you why. Some years ago, I was cycling in the promenade here in Brighton, and I was listening to Pink Floyd, my favorite group. I was listening to The Division Bell, and I was listening a song that is called Keep Talking. In this song, you have Professor Stephen Hawking talking about the following lines. He says, "For millions of years, mankind behaved just like the animals. But then something happened that unleashed the power of their imagination. They learned to talk." Well, that was a revelation for me. Suddenly, I discovered a silent revolution that had taken place, and I decided to take action on it. I was lecturer here at Sussex University, so I came back and started changing my teaching methodology. I went to my classroom and started pushing for new ways in order to ask my students to talk more. I started using Post-its. I started asking them to produce handouts. And actually, to try to be quite humble, I was quite successful. They wouldn't stop talking. It was incredible. But it took me a couple of years to realize that my strategy was flawed because they didn't listen to me when I asked them to shut up. So listening is a very, very important part of dialogue. And it is a mechanism, if you wish, to trigger the power of dialogue. Only when you listen and you open your mind, you are ready to reassess your thoughts. Only when you listen, you are able to imagine new realities. Actually, I wonder whether you are listening. And I guess you might be wondering when I'm going to start talking about the power of dialogue in Colombia. Well, if that's the case, then I guess we have been haunted by the power of dialogue. And as Wittgenstein says, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. So now, let me take you from here to Colombia. Colombia has been facing a conflict for the last 50 years. According to the last report of the Center for Historical Memory in Colombia, there are more than 6 million victims of the conflict. That's almost the size of London. Since 1982 till 2012, the government and FARC tried 3 times to solve the armed conflict, to end it, and they failed. And the largest number of victims were produced in those 30 years. In 2012, President Santos decided to start a peace process with FARC in Havana. And actually, that day, some Colombians here in London decided to drink some beers and start talking about it, and started listening to each other, and decided to create a group that they called Rodeemos el Diálogo. This means let's surround the dialogue, or let's rally for the dialogue. I wasn't part of it, but since I was interested because of my academic research, they contacted me and I decided to join them in November 2012. And this has been an incredible experiment. The first thing that we realized was that in order to support the peace process in Colombia, we needed to listen to the experts. We needed to listen to the people who had started the secret negotiations between the Colombian government and FARC. So we decided to organize a conference at LSE. We invited the people who had been in the jungle talking to the guerrilla and decided to invite also people who live in exile because of the armed conflict. This makes us realize of the complexity of the process, but also make us take an informed decision in order to keep working for this. And it brought us closer to another organization that actually asked us to start working with them in order to bring the Colombian diaspora together in London to talk about the fears and the hopes that the peace process had created in them, and to actually make some proposals that would we submit then to Havana. It was an incredible experience. We brought together people who had never been in touch with each other. And one of the results of this was that someone came to me and said, like, this is great. I had never thought that I could talk to this other that I always thought was my enemy. But actually, this should take place more often. And then we realized that the importance of dialogue is that it cannot end and take only place one time. So we decided to put together a series of conversatorios. And for the last 6 months, we have been bringing people together on a monthly basis to talk about the peace process in Colombia and how difficult it is for the two parties to get to an agreement. We brought people from different paths in life: students, diplomats, human rights defenders. All of these people who, without realizing, live in a bubble and never leave their comfort zone and never really push themselves to talk to others and try to be affected by others. I have to say that these conversatorios have not only affected the participants, but it has transformed us. We have been pushed to start new initiatives that we had never thought of before. For example, I'm an atheist. And actually, last December, I ended up writing a letter with some Catholics to Pope Francis, something I never thought I was going to do in my life, asking him, please, Pope, why don't you convince Colombians that they should support the peace process? The largest number of Colombian population is made of Catholic people. And this was an amazing experience that allowed me to push myself and push my ideas further and to be creative enough to write something that was universal. Not only that, to some of us Colombians who had left the country 10 years ago, it made us realize that perhaps it was the time to go back to Colombia and start working there. So I jumped on a plane after saying that I was going to become a lecturer in the UK, and I did. I went back to Colombia in January this year and started working with other Colombians there, trying to talk about the peace process. And this was a very important decision, because then I realized the importance of something that I had disregarded, and is that in order for the power of dialogue to unleash, you have to have a positive context. It is not easy to allow the power of dialogue to take over if you have fear around you all the time. And people in Colombia were full of fear. People did not want to talk because they thought that talking about the peace process in Colombia was dangerous. Defeating that fear is difficult, but we decided that we were going to do that. We started creating very small spaces of dialogue. We team up with the small businesses, cafes, restaurants, in order to try to create what we call now breakfast for peace. So now on Saturday mornings, some Colombians, no more than 20, sit together around a hot chocolate and a tamal, that I'm not going to get to explain what it is because it will take me another half an hour. But they talk about the peace process, and they lose their fear, and they discover that they can move away from their comfort zone, and that by doing that, they are transforming their everyday life and contributing in a rather small but very important dimension to solve the divisions in Colombian society. Enough of Colombia. So let me go back here to talk to you. Because to conclude, if you are still listening and I'm still talking, then it is because perhaps we are getting the feeling of the power of dialogue. Of course, we have the two main elements of the power of dialogue, listening and talking. But unfortunately, we cannot have the meaningful exchange, interactive experience, because I'm still wondering, what are you thinking? I'm still wondering what your questions would be, and I'm still waiting to hear that, and probably you still wanted to tell me things, and because that's not happening, the only thing that I can ask you is that if you have found something valuable of these 12 minutes, is to think about the power that you have in your hands once you walk out of this room into the street to listen to other people, to take seriously the points that they make, and how by doing that you can start talking in different ways. How can you offer new alternatives of possible worlds that you can imagine? I believe in the power of dialogue, and I hope I've been able to convey to you the importance of this basic human feature that we have, this amazing revolution that took place thousands of years ago. I'm not talking about new technological developments, to try to make an amazing point. I'm just telling you this is deep inside ourselves and it's been there forever. If we can use this, perhaps you will be able to relate with the drama of other people and the suffering of other people in other parts of the world and help them to make a difference. I wish I could share with you a video that we produced today with the group Rodeemos el Diálogo. It's 2 minutes video in which we are informing people and telling Colombians what are the things that have achieved and how they need to share this with others. Of course, the video wasn't ready, but if you want to be empowered and connected with Colombians, I ask you to please go and look for it on YouTube and help Colombians to change the country, and perhaps with that start changing this world. Thank you very much.